What's up, y'all? My name is Devontae, and I sacrifice my time so you don't have to. I'm going to be a little bit more serious in this video, and you may be asking yourselves, Devontae, is it really that serious of a topic? I feel that it is because it's a prominent distinction in regards to looking at today's professional wrestling versus where it was a couple of years ago. And this is not one of those old men yelling at the cloud videos. It may come across that way, but bear with me because there's a pro and there's a con to this. I mean, there's for sure more of a con to it, if anything else, if you ask me, but there are pros to this, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But I feel as if we have to at least discuss why this is being talked about. So last night, if you didn't watch my AEW Dynamite review, I highly recommend watching that first just to get a little bit more context as to why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling right now. Last night, Orange Cassidy had a match. I cannot remember the guy's name. It's escaping my mind right now. He's one half of the ROH Tag Team Champions with the Undisputed Kingdom. Again, it's slipping my mind right now. Regardless, though, I see a lot of people last night praising the match. Not in my video, not in my comment section, but in other videos and in other comment sections. People praising the match, saying, wow, these guys went out there and they worked super duper hard to get this match over. And I feel that mindset, that perspective, as far as constantly having to reward people just for the sake of empathetic, I don't know, vision, if it is. I don't know if that's probably the right word to say or the right way to say it, but I feel like going out of your way to reward people just for the sake of not making them feel bad, or for the sake of just kind of like undermining a bunch of other things to be focused on, I don't know, it's like a participation award, if you ask me. It comes across that way, when in reality, if we really want to be straightforward about the situation, you can like the match all you want to, but it was not a tolerable situation, at least for me, speaking about, because I like to look at the grand scheme of things. I like to look at the bigger picture as to why this occurred. Why is this happening? Is there a reason for this happening? And to be quite frank with you, there wasn't. You could have done multiple things to not go out of your way to kill the gimmick. And you're saying to yourself, Devontae, killing the gimmick? Yeah, killing the gimmick. You're having a random... Remember the last Texas Death Match we had? What was the last Texas Death Match we had? Was pretty recent. It was Swerve Strickland versus Hangman Adam Page. And no matter how you feel about that match, it lived up to the stipulation. At least at the time, I'm still a little bit mixed as far as whether or not the gimmick had to be, implemented, if you will. Because I don't feel that the rivalry... Now, the rivalry kind of feels that strong. But at the time, the rivalry didn't really feel like it necessitated it. But nevertheless, though, they had the gimmick. It was on pay-per-view. It was a part of a rivalry that went on for a while. And at the very least, I said, okay, I'm okay with it. And the match happened, and it's one of the greatest AEW matches of all time. No matter how you feel about it, at the very least, I would definitely say it's one of the most talked about AEW matches of all time. Can we at least agree on that? Right? And if for anything else, the fallout from it, now that we're 3 or 4 months removed from it, it's probably going to be the beginning of Swerve Strickland becoming a main eventer. Maybe in 20 years, people may look at this match no different than, and I'm not comparing the matches, folks. I'm talking about the situation in regards to the wrestler in itself. This may be Swerve Strickland, Stone Cold Steve Austin's WrestleMania 13 moment. As far as him in the match being in that situation, this is what's going to kick off his stardom. So even the fallout for it lends credence to the match in itself. Whereas to look at what happened with Orange Cassidy, and again, the guy whose name is slipping my mind right now, which just kind of adds more to it, right? Oh, Devontae, that's your fault for not knowing his name. Okay, true, I understand that, but if he was a big enough star, then maybe I shouldn't have too much of a trouble remembering his name. More of a reason why, he had no reason being in the match. The match had no reason being on Dynamite. The match had no reason being... none of this should have occurred. But of course, it's a gimmick match. And gimmick is going to sell. Gimmick is going to pop the crowd, brother. Is that really what you should be using your stipulations for? I thought the whole purpose of the stipulation was to add a cherry on top, right? I thought the whole purpose of gimmicks were to provide more, how would you say it? More layers to the situation at hand, the story at hand, right? Right? That's at least how I used to perceive gimmicks growing up. You know, like back in the days, I'll give you an example. You've probably seen it in the intro already, but you know, it's a perfect example, the Hell in a Cell. When the match first happened, and granted, I wasn't watching wrestling consistently. I just started getting into wrestling probably like a year prior to that in 1997. You had the Hell in a Cell match with Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker. I didn't watch the match at the time, but I do remember, because I was in elementary school at the time, I do remember going to school, and I do remember hearing my friends talk about it. And I do remember my friends maybe over-exaggerating. Actually, it was over-exaggerating, saying that The Undertaker killed Shawn Michaels and then Kane killed The Undertaker. They didn't say his name because no one knew his name at the time. Even though, you know, in hindsight, Vince said his name. We're in elementary school. No one's really paying attention all too much about that. Someone said that The Taker killed Shawn Michaels and then someone killed The Undertaker, a guy in a mask. And that's the kind of thing that kind of gets your imagination all riled up to want to see it. And then obviously we had King of the Ring 98 with Undertaker and Mankind. One of the most talked about matches in wrestling history to this very day. And it had this lore behind it, right? It had this sort of, I don't want to say, I guess legacy about it. I guess that's probably the best way to say it, right? Legend about the Hell in a Cell match. So whenever that stipulation was brought up, and yeah, there was a little bit of mishaps even back then. You know, you look at The Undertaker and Big Boss Man for an example. But even then, what was the conclusion of Undertaker and Big Boss Man? It was Big Boss Man being hanged, right? So even the conclusion, even though the match wasn't all that great, if not great at all, it still had a legacy behind it. Like I said, a folklore behind it. So when it was brought up, you knew stuff was about to go down. What happened the following year? Ignore the Kennel for Hell, but what happened the following year? Triple H and Cactus Jack, they had a Hell in a Cell match. And Jack's career was on the line. Ignore WrestleMania 2000. Going forward, though, again, what happened in that match? Jack went through a Hell in a Cell through the floor. And mind you, what preceded that with Jack was him getting thrown at the Hell in a Cell, him getting choked through the roof. What happened after that Hell in a Cell match? Armageddon, 6-man Hell in a Cell. All the feuds that everybody was participating in. Undertaker getting screwed by Kurt Angle. Right? And mind you, they had a feud off and on for about, maybe 4 or 5 months, going back into Fully Loaded, when Taker was being pretty much harassed by Kurt Angle and having his property destroyed, like his motorcycle. Rikishi and The Rock, that whole situation that was going down. Rikishi hitting The Rock in the chest with a sledgehammer, screwing him out of championship matches. Stone Cold Steve Austin and Triple H, they had a 2-year rivalry nearly at that point. Like, it needed that, you know what I mean? And then to make matters even better, no one talks about this. After the Hell in a Cell match with Armageddon, the Hell in a Cell stipulation wasn't used for a year and a half. That's a fun fact. In 2001, the Hell in a Cell concept was not used at all throughout the entire the entire year was not used at all. And nearly for the first half of 2002. Which made it even more alluring when Vince McMahon went to Triple H and he was like, "You, Jericho, Hell in a Cell." Judgment Day, 2002. Then Undertaker and Brock Lesnar. And then it just goes on and on and on. Triple H and Shawn Michaels. Triple H and Kevin Nash the year prior to that. Right? Randy Orton and Undertaker had a whole year. Their feud started like around late February, early March of 2005. And it culminated in a Hell in a Cell match in December. That's nearly an entire year of them feuding. 2006, 2007, 2008, and then we get to 2009. And that's when the problems start to arise with Hell in a Cell, obviously. Right? Now it's a pay-per-view. Now it's an annual thing. I can tolerate something like the Elimination Chamber being an annual thing because it's 6 participants. How do you I don't know, gin up a story like that? How do you just go out of your way to randomly make a Hell in a Cell Armageddon type of rivalry, because that's what you would need to do in order to constitute or have an excuse to have an elimination chamber like that going forward. So I can get that being a yearly thing, especially if it means going to WrestleMania as a last resort because you failed at the Royal Rumble. I get that. I understand that. That's fine. But Hell in a Cell? And look at how it happened year after year after year after year after year after year after year. The watering down of the gimmick over and over and over and over again. Then you started putting red paint on top of it. Now you're having disqualifications inside of it. Now you're having match stoppages inside the Hell in a Cell. Now you're having rivalries that don't really need, or again, they do not constitute. I like Seth Rollins and Edge that happened at one of the Saudi Arabia shows back in 2021, I think. That was a hell of a fun Hell in a Cell match. Probably the best Hell in a Cell match of the 2020s. Easily, actually. That was a great match. Did their feud really need a Hell in a Cell? Considering they started feuding in July or August of that same year, and that culminated, I think, in either October or November, if I'm not mistaken. Did it really need that? I don't think it really needed that. A Hell in a Cell is supposed to be a last resort. Honest to God, you can make an argument that you should probably have maybe even 2 gimmicks prior to Hell in a Cell. You should probably have 1 or 2 single matches. You should probably have a no disqualification match. You should probably have a steel cage and a last man standing directly after that. And then the Hell in a Cell. Obviously, these things should be in, in increments. You don't do them back to back to back to back to back. But the Hell in a Cell should be the last resort. Everything else, it's think about Dragon Ball Z as an analogy, right? Right? You had to get through, Vegeta, or actually you had to get through Raditz first to get through Vegeta first. And then you ended up on Namek, and then you had to get through, what the hell are their names again? Oh, God, oh, man. Oh, my God, I forgot their names. The Ginyu Force. Yeah, the Ginyu Force. My bad. You had to get through the Ginyu Force in order to get to Frieza, right? And one may argue that the Vegeta arc is kind of separate from the Frieza arc, but I feel like everything kind of built up to that in the end of the day. That's just my opinion. I mean, some people might separate that, and I can understand that, but I kind of use them all together. I think, Frieza was the last person. But again, if you want to say Vegeta, I understand. But my point being is, though, you know what you had to do in order to build up eventually to Goku versus Frieza? And let me tell you, there is no kid in America, and probably in Japan also, but let's just say in America in general, there is no kid below the age of 13 who didn't go absolutely bananas for Goku going up against Frieza. Just knowing all the torment that he did to everybody, the backstory behind why Vegeta is even the way that he is, which is why I actually always put them together. But yeah, that whole entire arc, you can say the same thing about Cell. When they had to build up to Cell through the androids before you got there. You can say the same thing about Majin Buu, when they had to build up with, Babidi and Dabur and all them. There are arcs to this, and that's why I'm saying that the gimmick matches are failing. Because, there's really no reason for it. And yet, people keep making excuses for why gimmick matches should occur. To be quite frank with you, gimmick matches should be so infrequent. You should have, maybe 20 or 30 gimmick matches, and every last one of them should be incredibly infrequent. Right? Right, whether you're talking about a ladder match, whether you're talking about a TLC match, which, by the way, even things like that, like a TLC match, that should never happen at all if it doesn't involve Edge and Christian, the Hardy Boys, or the Dudley Boys, or if they're advocating for someone to take place in that match. If they're not advocating, because, they're too old nowadays, I get it. Even though you can argue Edge and Christian are still around, I get it, they're too old. But if they are not directly involved with it, even the concept of the TLC shouldn't be happening, because it doesn't make any sense. The whole point of the TLC match was because the Hardy Boys consistently use ladders in all of their matches. Not all the time, obviously, but that was their gimmick. The Dudley Boys, their gimmicks were tables. As you seen what happened last night, Edge and Christian gimmicks are chairs. That was the purpose of the TLC, yet you just took it and just randomly put it in situations that really don't necessitate it, and it doesn't make sense in regards to the superstars that are involved inside it. Because none of those guys fit the stipulation, because the stipulation involved was on the basis of an angle, was on the basis of a gimmick by the teams and themselves. That was the point of the TLC match. Same thing can be said about a Buried Alive match. That's the Undertaker's thing. Same thing can be said about an Inferno match. That's Kane's thing. You can argue the Undertaker and Kane. Buried Alive, or a casket match, that's Undertaker's thing and Kane's thing. And if you're going to go to the Buried Alive match, that's Mankind's thing also. It's not just simply having a dark character like Darby Allin, and even then, I can even make an argument for Darby Allin because his finisher is called the coffin drop. So if he wants to make the casket match his thing, that's fine, right? You can't just throw out gimmicks for the sake of throwing out gimmicks. There has to be some type of consistency, right? And then I see people do it just randomly on AEW, for an example. And don't get it twisted. I just totally bury WWE in the same type of rhetoric when talking about the Hell in a Cell match. They do these things way too much. And it's a crutch. It's a crutch to get around the fact that you can't tell a legitimate story without having to... Because, think about it at the end of the day. What would you rather do if you, just hypothetically speaking, you, as a business owner, let's just say you're a wrestling business owner, let's say you're a promoter, let's say you're in the shoes of Tony Khan or Triple H, right? What makes more sense to you? You played general manager mode in the past, if you're old enough in the old SmackDown vs. Raw games. What happened if you put a superstar inside of a hardcore match, and then wait about 3 weeks and you put him inside a steel cage match, and then you wait another 3 weeks and you put him in a Hell in a Cell match? What happens? You remember, if you play general manager mode, the fatigue bar goes really, really up, and then sooner or later, your superstar gets injured, and he gets taken out. Now, what if that superstar is one of the only superstars on your show that has a popularity over 80? You need that guy to help boost your ratings on your show. You need that guy to, and God forbid if he has the championship belt, now your championship belt is vacant. Now you have to put on another superstar whose popularity isn't that high, and it's not going to help out your show. All because you couldn't take the time to put them in a storyline, build it up appropriately, stop wasting your funds all the time trying to slander another brand. Shout out to my little brother. If you give your superstars the right story, none of this happens. None of this has to happen. You don't kill your gimmick. You don't put your superstars, and this is not just general manager mode, this is real life. Superstars can easily get injured when you put them in gimmick matches like this, because, newsflash, usually with these gimmick matches, there are weapons involved. Usually in these gimmick matches, they're hard hitting. There are things that can happen to the human body that, in the end of the day, it's gonna hurt. It's gonna really hurt. It's gonna break something. You're gonna get concussions. And then what happens? They're taken out of a situation where they can't perform on television. Yeah, you can argue to a certain degree that the same thing can be said about single matches with how these superstars perform. But at least then you could say that they were being careless with their moves, right? You can argue the same thing in gimmick matches also, but 9 times out of 10, it's because they're doing something involving the stipulation, which indirectly involves the people who thought that this was a good idea to begin with when it didn't have to be that way. It really, really didn't. Look at Hangman and Swerve. That match that they had on Dynamite like a week or 2 ago, that match could have happened at the pay-per-view that just passed right now, right? The first one, Swerve won. The second one, this could have been a draw also. You could have done something. And that right there could have been the number one contender shot, and you could have started building Samoa Joe and them in that triple threat match from that point right there. From that point right there. Right? Or better yet, I'll do you one better. Maybe Swerve could have won the first one. Maybe Heyman could have won the second one. Maybe they could have ran it back and they could have did a simple stipulation. Nothing crazy. A steel cage match at World's End. And that could have been the number one contender shot for Samoa Joe's title, right? And they both land on the feet at the same time outside the steel cage, whatever gimmick you want to do. And now you're having the triple threat match with Samoa Joe. And you could have done something, because I know obviously Joe's going to retain the belt. And now you could have been building up into the Texas Death Match going into Double or Nothing. You see how you kind of just script all that out going into the show to culminate in the Texas Death Match? But no, rather you use a Texas Death Match and a nonsensical match with Orange Cassidy versus one half of an ROH Tag Team Champion when he's the most inconsequential person within the group to build to a mid-card match with Roderick Strong. They're just doing gimmicks for the sake of doing gimmicks. And again, it makes it even worse because there are so many fans out there and they see this, and rather than actually calling out for what it is, which is laziness, they see that the wrestlers are busting their behinds inside the match and they're not going to call it out because it's like, well, man, these wrestlers, they're trying their best right now. You can say that they're trying their best and still at the same time say that this is BS. This is BS. When is enough when you can look past just your arbitrary outlook as far as what constitutes good professional wrestling? And I'm looking more so at the older people, man. Because these young kids out here, these people who believe that this is a good thing currently at the moment, they don't know anything else. They don't know what a good story is. They don't know what it means to see a long-term rivalry play out for months, maybe even years, culminating at a certain event, and you're super excited for it. They don't know that. They have to deal with professional wrestling nowadays where you have people consistently breaking kayfabe, where you have people consistently doing this and doing that and doing this and doing that. Don't even get me twisted. Don't even get me started. Because it's not just the matches. Oh, no. It's also the gimmicks. Oh, this is a long video. We're going to continue on this because you think I'm getting just pissed off at just the gimmicks? Oh, no. It goes further. It's the characters also. It's people who can't just keep up with what they're doing because they so badly want to be validated online. They so badly want people to look at what they're doing and hey, don't focus on my character name. Focus on the person who's actually delivering. Focus on that name. That name right there. It's like the whole Sasha Banks thing. Sasha Banks, even in WWE, was still saying, refer to her as Mercedes. Her real name. Like, why? Why? If you can't live the gimmick, then why are you being paid millions of dollars? It's so lazy. And if it's not lazy, then it's entitlement. And if it's not entitlement, then it's conceitedness. Which one do you want to pick in the end of the day? Because you can't not just ignore one and say that it happens to be the other, or ignore all three and just come up with some cockamamie nonsense in your mind, because you're still ignoring the fact that, hey, you're being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. Just think to yourself that you deserve millions when you can't even do the basic necessity of what wrestlers got paid $50 for about 50 years ago to do, going town to town 300 miles in distance from each other. It's ridiculous. One thing I will always give credit to for an MJF, whether you hate him, whether you love him, is the fact that the guy is pretty consistent as far as his character is considered. And even then, even him sometimes can't help but break character sometimes. But here's my question for some of the people in the audience when it comes to the character department in terms of gimmicks. Like, what do you need? Like, what makes good professional wrestling to you? I put out this poll about Seth Rollins not too long ago. And I asked you guys, because there's a lot of people who don't like Seth Rollins right now. And I asked, why do you hate Seth Rollins? Do you hate him because of his character? Or do you hate him because of who he is overall, his entire package deal? And the majority of you said character, right? You don't have to like Seth Rollins. I'm not even trying to simp for Seth Rollins. I'm not the world's biggest Seth Rollins fan. But the guy is doing a gimmick, right? And I'm one of the only people who actually hate that he actually goes serious and then goes back out, because it's just a contradiction overall. It's a contradiction when you do it consistently. Because I'm assuming that's now earmarked as a part of an attribute of your character, is you constantly getting upset and getting mad when, hey, well, let me drop the comic, let me get that's unless you have like some type of schizophrenia, like that's not really what I would say necessarily is, I don't know, notated as far as going forward with your character. Like, it's just an attribute that contradicts everything about your values as the character if you're trying to promote this Joker-esque type of gimmick. Like, right now, either you do and commit to the entire gimmick, which in my opinion, it's not a bad thing if you know what you're doing. I think I've seen a couple of people say this and they're absolutely right. First things first, this gimmick doesn't work as a babyface. It's a heel gimmick. It's a heel gimmick. Also, what are you running as far as vignettes? What's the backstory as to why Seth feels this way? The gimmick is not bad. It's just how they're portraying it right now is bad. But the gimmick can work. You can't consistently go in and out of the seriousness and, oh, well, now I'm goofy again. Oh, well, now I'm serious. The laugh is fine. The catchphrase is fine. But there has to be a backstory and there has to be a reason. I see wrestling fans say all the time that authenticity, I need people to be real. No, you don't. No, you don't. That's what takes people out of professional wrestling. It's constantly trying to remind them that reality happens to be a thing. No, you don't need that. Now, I'm not saying all wrestlers have to be gimmicks. I'm not saying that. But to suggest that authenticity should be above the actual character, to be above the gimmick, I highly disagree. Because when done correctly, when a gimmick is done correctly, you get The Undertaker. When a gimmick is done correctly, you get Kane. When a gimmick is done correctly, you get Sting. And I'm not just talking Sting. Whether you're talking about Scorpion Sting or whether you're talking about Surfer Sting. All right. When a gimmick is done correctly, you get Foley. 3 faces of Foley. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Now it's a television show rather than a reality television show. Not everybody has to be authentic. It doesn't say authenticity is a bad thing. You look at someone like a CM Punk. Look at a straight edge gimmick. Authenticity is not a bad thing. But pure and true authenticity is a bad thing. Especially in 2024. If you would have asked me this about 10 or 12 years ago before the pipe bomb, I'd have a different opinion. But when everybody's trying so hard to be real, when everybody's trying so hard to be just me, let me do me, then what are you focusing on, right? Because no longer is the gimmick appropriate to really want to focus because you took that element away. Now it's starting to linger on the whole, well, let's do the moves. Well, let's focus on, and now you have to focus on the gimmick matches, right? Because no one gives a shit about you and your uniqueness as a person. No one cares about you. The people who do, they can go on Twitter and go find out who you are, which would be nice if you use your Twitter to maybe promote your character. No, but we have to hear more about politics and where you stand on issues. Come on, give me a break, man. The entire wrestling business was predicated on trying to bring you out of reality and subject you into a world of fable. Subject you into a world of fiction. Professional wrestling is drama for men. Not to say women can't be a part of it or a part of the audience. I'm not saying that. But it was constructed to be drama for men. And to see where it's at right now, to see the reliance on gimmicks, to see the reliance on people having to do shoots all the time on social media in order to get around the fact that, hey, you yourself aren't good enough to get across whatever you're trying to get across from a fictional standpoint. Where I remember last year, and I'm going to end it with this. I remember last year, if you're OG of the channel, remember, like in the early portions of January, between the Royal Rumble to WrestleMania, we rarely really talked about any wrestling news for real. Obviously, maybe, here and there. But the majority of that, let's say for sure, like that, maybe period between the Royal Rumble and the Elimination Chamber, almost every video I uploaded had to deal with the Bloodline angle and Sami Zayn. And all of that was fictional. And it was fun. It was fun. The Bloodline is a gimmick. It's a gimmick. There was no shooting. There was no, oh, wow, well, brother, these backstage, no, it was none of that. No. It was Sami Zayn, who was trying to be in a group, being played. He got kicked out of the group. Jey Uso, who wanted him out of the group to begin with, he finally started to like Sami. And Sami Zayn got kicked out of the group and he hates it. And it was just so much twists and turns in the story. The promos were great. The vignettes were great. Everything about it was great. And not one element of it involved, let me shoot from the hip, brother. Well, golly gee willikers, we have to do a Hell in a Cell match, steel cage match, none of that. Everything that happened were single matches or a tag team match. And it all revolved around a story. Authenticity isn't bad. But when it's the sole thing worth looking at, it's like the whole socialism and capitalism argument. Socialism is not bad at all. But when socialism is the only thing that's implemented, it is horrible. Just reflect off of what I said. This goes for everybody, whether you're older, whether you're younger. Just reflect off what I said. I'm not saying you have to get rid of gimmicks. I'm not saying that you have to get rid of characters who, for an example, gimmicks or any of that stuff, who, for an example, just like there's no semblance of things that you can legitimately relate to as a character like you would to a superhero if you were a kid. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying dial it back. And let's get back to the fundamentals of professional wrestling. Gimmicks, they're dead right now. I don't really see it coming back because I don't really see anyone following this mentality. But man, I guess at the very least, we can at least focus on it and talk about it. And who knows? Maybe it can be resurrected. As always, my name is Devontae, and I'll be catching you guys later. Deuces, P. Ice.